Well, great. Well, you were talking about how you took a 6-year break. I never took that long of a, when I moved to California and I was pursuing the orchestration, I think it was maybe 3 years where I didn't write any band music. And then I got a commission and my thoughts exploded because it was all building up for 3 years. So that's probably you're going to explode with this great grade 4 composition.
I sure hope so. I'd like to have a signature piece. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. I'd like to acknowledge Vandercook College of Music for sponsoring this episode. With a world-class faculty, a location just minutes from downtown Chicago, and an intensive summers-only master's program, it's no wonder Vandercook College of Music has graduates teaching music in all 50 states, 21 countries, and 6 continents. Make next summer your most inspiring summer yet by pursuing a master's in music education at Vandercook College of Music. And for the next generation of music educators, Vandercook offers an exceptional, comprehensive 4-year Bachelor of Music Education program. Vandercook admissions information is available at www.vandercook.edu. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know 1 or 2 people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And now on to this week's guest, composer Rossano Galante. Hi, Rossano.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
So, Rossano, can you tell the listeners who you are and what you're doing?
Yes, my name is Rossano Galante. I am a concert band and composer, and I also am a film music orchestrator. I've moved to California in 1999, and I have been orchestrating many films, over 60 films, and I have about 32 published concert band pieces, and that's what I do. That's my living, and I'm having a great time out here in sunny California.
Yeah, Rossano, so I know that you're from upstate New York. Can you talk about your early career, like sort of how you got your start with music and maybe when you knew you wanted to be a professional musician?
Sure. Even before I started studying music, our school took us on a field trip to see the Buffalo Philharmonic. I guess I was in maybe 1st or 2nd grade. It was before all the music started. So the Philharmonic was giving us a private concert for all these little kids, our school. And I didn't know what was going on, but I was kind of excited at what was going to happen. So we're waiting for the orchestra. The orchestra starts coming on the stage, and I'm in the front row seated by the violins. And I'm like, man, this is a huge group. What's about to happen? I was fascinated. I thought the instruments were pretty. I was looking at the whole orchestra. I thought, these are neat looking instruments. What's going to happen? So the conductor comes on stage, and they start playing the Saber Dance by Khachaturian. And as soon as that happened, I was in shock at how incredible the orchestra sounded, how big and powerful, and how all these human beings on a stage were able to create this massive sound with all the counterlines and harmonies. I could not believe what I was hearing. And I just thought in my head, wow, that's so cool. And of course, I had no desire to become a composer. I didn't really know what that meant, but I just was fascinated. So I then started studying trumpet in, I believe it was 4th grade. And then you get to the point where you're good enough to play in the little kiddie band. So I was good enough to play in the kiddie band, and I think I was 2nd or 3rd trumpet. And I remember there was probably about maybe 20, 30 people in the band. I can't remember. It was a small group, but I thought we sounded great. And I remember when the conductor was conducting, we were playing these tunes, I didn't care so much about my part. I was fascinated by what everyone else was doing. So I would go sit in the flute section, and I'd be like, wow, look at those ledger lines. That's so cool. And then I'd go sit in the clarinet section, and I know there was these runs and these trills. Then I'd go sit in the tuba section, and that was a different clef, and the part looked really boring. I was just fascinated by all of that. But I still didn't think that I was going to become a composer. So fast forward to middle school, and I'm in a bigger band, and we sound great. And I said to myself, I think I'm going to try to write myself just a composition, just for fun. So I went home and I studied a little bit of the, orchestration of E flat, alto sax, and B flat clarinet, the transpositions, and I wrote this composition. And I gathered a bunch of my friends to my house. We had a big basement, and they brought their stands. I had all the chairs set up, and I was the conductor in middle school, and I had my little band of 15 kids. And I started conducting, and I'm going to tell you, it was probably the worst piece of music you could have ever heard in your life. And I was pretty upset. I was like, oh my God, I'm not good at this. This is terrible. So I was pretty upset, but one of my friends said, hey, Rossano, this was your first attempt. And you know what? The piece was not that bad. Keep it up. Keep trying. So I stopped for a while. Fast forward, we're in high school now. And I decided to write a 8-bar fanfare. And our band, we had about 100 people in our band, so it was big. So I wrote this 8-bar fanfare, and I knew what I was doing. I knew the transpositions, and I felt, okay, this is going to work. So I asked my director, Mr. Schirmer, I said, hey, can we run this down? He said, of course. I said, it'll take 5 minutes. I'll play trumpet, you conduct. He goes, sure. So he starts conducting, and it was phenomenal. I couldn't believe the sounds that I had created. The woodwinds were trilling, the brass fanfares, and it only lasted 8 bars. But after those 8 bars, I said to myself, well, nothing can beat this feeling. So I guess I'm going to have to find a way to pursue a career in composition. And then I went to college, theory. I really have no training as a composer or orchestrator. I am self-taught, but I did study theory. And from then on, that's how I became a composer and an orchestrator.
So yeah, that feeling of when you first write a piece of music and you have it performed, it's pretty intoxicating.
Yeah, it's like the best. And that first rundown, sometimes I go to a lot of places that have already rehearsed. So hearing that for the first time is just heaven. It's just fantastic. I'm sure, you've experienced that many times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't start writing. I kind of had the opposite experience. I didn't write when I was young. I got to college as a music ed major, and I had electives as a junior in college, and I wrote a piece that was very successful right off the bat. And that's when I caught that bug. So I started later, but then I ended up getting a master's and a doctorate in composition.
Excellent. So you didn't get to write any bad compositions. You just started out and you wrote something great.
Oh no, I have my share of really bad ones. So I want to ask, those first 8 bars that you wrote, that fanfare, have you used those in any piece that's still around?
No, I never used it. What I did was I expanded those 8 bars. The school asked me to write an alma mater for them, and I expanded that to an alma mater, but they thought it was too epic. For an alma mater, so they said no. But I was pretty happy with it, and it was a good learning experience.
Before we turn back to band exclusively, let's talk about after. So you went to SUNY Buffalo, I see in your bio. And so then what led you to want to be a film composer, and what was that experience like to become an orchestrator and to do that?
From a young age, I would go to the movies, and I have 2 good memories. I went to see Superman with my family, and after the movie was over, I was actually crying because of the music. The music was so powerful and beautiful and exciting and thrilling for me. My emotions were, I couldn't handle it. So nobody noticed me crying, but I couldn't believe John Williams' scores. And then the next score that just tears me apart is the score to E.T. And I believe that is, after hearing that score, I said, I want to do this. I think I could do this. I mean, to be able to write beautiful music to a film, and that I'm just like, this is what I want to do. So after I graduated from SUNY Buffalo with BA in trumpet performance, that I knew I would never use because I have stage fright when it comes to playing my trumpet. I used to get so nervous when I had a trumpet solo, and I always did great, but my heart would pound out of my chest. So, anyways, I applied to the USC Advanced Film Scoring Program. Now, they only accepted 19 people, and I just submitted my scores. They loved them, and they accepted me. And I went through, it was a 1-year program, and I studied with the late Jerry Goldsmith, which was incredibly thrilling. The guys, Jerry and John Williams, I love those composers very much, very influential. So I go through the program, and I realized film scoring was a little more challenging than I thought it would be, but I said, okay, let's still try to pursue this. So years later, I made the final move to California. Now, I did make some connections at the school with Marco Beltrami, who is a 2-time Oscar-nominated composer. The films were 3:10 to Yuma and The Hurt Locker. And when I moved out here, of course, they have to try you out and make sure you can orchestrate. And he tried me out in some films, and he said, okay, Rossano knows what he's doing. So I've been orchestrating for Marco for the last 20 years, and it's been a great relationship. He's a great guy, so talented.
So how much orchestration do you do a year in terms of your workload? Do you have a percentage?
It averages, maybe 4 films a year, sometimes less, and actually sometimes more. Not all my credits are listed on IMDB, but yeah, I would have to say about 4 to 6 a year. And the thing is, that's so very doable, because when you get hired to orchestrate, it's a 2-week process or even a 1-week process. That's because they have a team, and you have to move very fast.
Yeah. Are you given measures? Are you told to do like from this cue to this cue, or how does that work?
Well, there's a separate cues. So they'll assign me like 10 specific cues, and they're like actually 10 separate compositions, and
right.
I'll orchestrate those specific cues.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I have scored in my early years. I did score a few films, and that is when I realized, after scoring the films, that I did not want to pursue film scoring, because I wasn't thrilled. I didn't enjoy the process. It was arduous. It was not pleasant for me, and very, very stressful. And I really want to enjoy my life and not lead a life of overly stressed out. Some people can handle that. I prefer not to destroy my life and my health. So I finally realized, nope, this is not what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be an orchestrator and a concert band composer. And once I realized that, I became much more happier. Yeah,
that's terrific. That sounds like a nice balance. It's you're not just doing one thing. You still have your toes dipped into 2 pools, I guess.
Yeah, I really like that.
Do you ever find yourself in conflict where you have to turn down a gig because you have a film to orchestrate, or vice versa?
Usually, if anything has to be turned down, it's an orchestration gig, because say I have guest conducting, I can't cancel on them after the contract has been signed. So I've had to turn down, not many, maybe like 1, and it's painful to turn it down, because you got to make money.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the concert band compositions. And so when did that start? I assume college, beyond that high school experience with that fanfare.
Yeah. When I started college, I studied with one composer for 1 semester, but the chemistry wasn't right, so I had to just study on my own. And I actually did try to find an orchestration teacher, but that was not possible, so I had to study that on my own. And as soon as I started college, I was just at home writing these band pieces just for fun. I was just sitting at the piano, coming up with themes, and then I, of course, got my pen and paper, and there's no computers back then, no Sibelius, no Finale. So everything was done by hand, and I loved writing music with a pencil and paper. It was so fun. There was a connection. And I don't do that anymore because I have to move quicker, so I go right to the computer. So I remember writing these compositions. Now, it's very important for a composer to hear their music played back, because that is the best way to learn and to improve and to balance an ensemble. And my biggest learning is I wanted to make sure the ensemble was balanced. So what I did is I would call all my friends, like enough for a concert band, like 40 people. I would call a perfectly balanced wind ensemble, and I'd say, hey, I want to have a little rehearsal, and we're going to record it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't pay you. I am a student. I have no money. And everybody was on board. And there was a place where I was in a community band, and they let me use that place with all the percussion and stuff. So what I would do, all these people would actually show up. I couldn't believe it. And I would have like a 2-hour rehearsal of my new pieces and record them. And I instantly knew, as soon as I started conducting, I instantly knew what the problems were. I knew that some keys were kind of rough and some of the balances were off, especially, sometimes the woodwinds would not come out and the brass was too heavy. So I spent, good 5 years through my entire college life having these rehearsals. I write new pieces, I have a rehearsal, record it, rehearse, record. I submitted to competitions and publishers and was rejected and lost all the competitions. I didn't care. I was having so much fun, exploring composition and getting a little bit better and better and better. I got better rather quickly because, like I said, you learn so much when you hear your music coming back to you. You know what not to do next time. And then my first published piece was called Rays of the Sun, and it was with Dehaske Curnow Publications, and I didn't submit it. One of my professors suggested asked if he could just send it in, because I gave up because I was rejected so much, I just gave up. And he submitted it for me, and they loved the piece, and they published it. And that was how the ball started to slowly get rolling, was with that first composition called Rays of the Sun.
So who was supporting you? I mean, you talk about how you were able to put these bands together yourself. You had no institutional support. Were you getting music played by the university bands?
Not at first, but I believe it was my senior year where I asked Dr. Sylvester, he was the conductor, he said, hey, can I bring in a composition just to run down? And he was very supportive. And he said, yes. And I'll tell you another story later, but I brought my piece in and I started conducting, and he stood up because he thought it was a wonderful composition. He said it was very Disney. And it did sound a little Disney, and I didn't take that as an insult because I love Disney music. It's very much, but it was very bubbly and very waterfall-like, but it was a lot of fun. And he said, Rossano, it's a great piece. I want to do it for a concert. So I got a lot of support from him. Also, after I was done with college, I was just helping out in the wind ensemble. And do you know Charles Peltz? He was conducting at UB. He was a fantastic conductor, and he commissioned me, and we premiered one of my pieces. So I got support from him as well. There was a time when I did not get support from another maestro. I'm not going to mention his name, but what happened was I asked this person if I could bring a wind ensemble piece in to start me. He said yes, and then I followed up a couple of years later, and he got very upset and said, I just don't have time for this. And I smiled and I said, I completely understand, and I walked away. But like I said, Charles Peltz was a great supporter, Dr. Sylvester, Sarah McCoyne, all these people, I don't know if you know them, but great supporters, and that was nice. And then also in high school, they were very supportive of me bringing in stuff to sight read. It was great.
One of the things you mentioned a little bit earlier when you were talking about writing is that you started on pencil and paper. And I don't know if we have any band directors who are wannabe composers or are thinking about writing, or maybe young composers who are listening, but do you have any thoughts about writing directly to the computer versus pencil and paper, and sort of maybe advice for a young person or a young composer?
Well, I think everybody should try pencil and paper initially, because there's a connection in your brain. You're physically writing down your thoughts, and it's labor intensive, but there's satisfaction to that labor. I used to sketch up after I would compose all my stuff on the piano, and it was done in my brain. The fun part was getting my sketch manuscript paper, plopping on the TV, and then sketching out my entire composition. It was so much fun. I mean, I was like giggly how fun it was, because you can see it come to life on paper. But now time is of the essence, and I move much quicker. What I do is when I finish the piece on the piano, I mock it up with my orchestral sounds on my computer using Digital Performer. And then once that's mocked up, that's my sketch. And then I do the orchestration on Sibelius. But I think it's important to do a little hard labor with the pencil and paper. It feels good. It exercises your brain, and maybe compositions are better when you use pencil and paper. I don't know.
Yeah, I started much like you did in the early days of computers. I think, we had a really rudimentary notation program when I was in college, and then it was until graduate school that I got Finale 2.5, and that was 1992 or 3 or something like that. So, but when I write a piece of music, I have to start at the piano. There's something about the acoustic sounds that I can't get. It just allows me more freedom and allows me more imagination. So I have to start at the piano, but I very quickly moved to the computer now.
So I have a question for you. Am I allowed to ask you questions?
Sure.
What's your process?
That's a question I usually ask the composers. Well, my process, it's boy, you're putting me on the spot here. This isn't supposed to happen. I generally start as a composer with the piano, and I usually have an idea that comes into my mind. So I have a recorder on my phone. I know a lot of composers do this. I use Evernote, and I sing ideas as they come to me. And then when I have an idea that's persistent enough that just won't go away, that's when I know I have something for a piece. And usually it's just the way I think. I tend to write young band music. I hear a lot more grade 1, 2 music in my head than I do necessarily more advanced music. And so often I'm then putting that together in sort of those grade levels. But for larger pieces, it's a much more difficult process. Obviously things happen in sections much more. But usually it starts with an idea in my head, and then I flesh it out on the piano. And then when I get stuck, you go through the usual composer things, right? You try to spin things out, counterpoint, development, all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, pretty straightforward at the moment. How about you? What's your process?
Well, kind of similar to what you go through. I'm actually going through it right now. And I'm going to be honest, and because I believe it's important to be honest, I am struggling on this one. It's a new commission. They wanted a 6-minute piece. They wanted a fast opening section, lush, gorgeous middle section, emotional, and of course another fast section. Kind of like a lot of my compositions. A lot of people like that balance. That's
sort of the band formula, right?
Yeah, and I like that formula a lot because it's a nice balance. So my process, okay. I usually, if I can't come up with my fast thematic material, I'll go to the more lyrical stuff, which sometimes comes a little easier. This one has not come easy. I've been sitting at the piano, and I think I got it, but I was playing the same thing over and over again, making sure it all works and develops and is interesting harmonically. So once I'll get those themes in, then I'll try to come up with my introduction and my main thematic material. My music is thematic based, not motives. So I usually have basically the faster thematic material and then slower thematical, sometimes 2 or 3 things. And that's enough to create a nice 4 to 6 minute composition. And I would have to say the biggest challenge is just coming up with very strong melodies, because I won't settle for mediocre melodies. If they don't grab me, it's not going to work. So sometimes things just don't happen quickly. I've been working on it for about a week right now, and I think I've got some stuff. But it is a very tough process. And, I'm not sure if you go through this, but I'll sulk and I'll be upset with myself thinking, I'm not a composer. I can't do this. And I'll be upset and I'll like pray to God, like, what's going on? I need help. And then eventually, it just takes work. You got to sit at the piano, you have to do the work, and eventually all the sweat and tears, and you have a new composition. And yes, the harder piece is difficult, very difficult. I would have to say composing is the funnest challenge of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can understate that imposter syndrome, that self-doubt that comes in when you're creating something. And I know it's not just composers. I know visual artists and dancers and all sorts of creative people get it.
Do you get upset if you can't come up with stuff? Do you get upset?
Oh, yeah. Well, I constantly feel like I'm not good enough to do this. And I have to convince myself, yep, you can do it.
Oh, well, you can.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's important that people know that composers feel that way. As you were talking, one of the things you mentioned, and now this is going to be really inside baseball for the listeners who aren't composers, but I want to ask you, composer, because I often also write thematic-based materials because I'm hearing these melodies in my head. One of my big challenges with starting with thematic material is that it's often self-contained and that it resists development. Do you find that to be a problem?
Well, it is a problem. My melodies are simple, and it's a simple form. AABA or AABBA, or the kind of music I write does not develop like symphonies.
Right, exactly.
I feel that's, I don't feel I have that ability to write these big symphonies. And I could write a short symphony based on melodic materials. I find it very, very difficult to develop. Yes. Right.
Well, if you listen to an hour-long Mahler symphony, the themes are actually fairly sparse. It's mostly motivic development throughout the entire work.
Yep.
And so I think that's a challenge, especially when you're writing band music. And I wonder if that's just not part of our genre.
I don't think it is part of our genre. Band music is not, they're not hour-long, not all of them are hour-long pieces. There's
right.
A few. They're like 4 to 6 to 10 minutes at most compositions. And it's basically a lot of thematic material. You play around with it, you switch it up, you have lots of themes. That's what I learned from when I was doing band music in high school. That was my influence. Yeah.
Well, we also have the educational aspect too. We can't give beginners, 16-bar phrases.
Right.
That's not going to work. All right. So we should probably get back to something that's a little bit more general. Because we were really digging into the composition stuff there.
Yes.
And so we already talked about how concert bands, your primary focus. One of the conversations I have with composers when they come on the show is the idea of self-publishing versus commercially published. Now, I know that you have music through both Alfred and Hal Leonard. Do you have any self-published music?
I do not have any self-published music. I also have Hafabra and Rundel Music, so I have actually 4 publishers. I've thought about self-publishing, and I did some research. Apparently, it's very difficult. It becomes a big job, and I feel I'm a little lazy when it comes to self-publishing because I have a backlog of pieces that I'd like to get out there. But the thing is, when you self-publish, how are you going to let people know that you have a new work out? It's about marketing, and how do you market it? That's my question.
Right. I think it's really a personality thing, and I'll be careful here about how I say this, because of the people I've talked to, I'm like you. I can't imagine, with all the things that I do in my life, managing a self-publishing business where I'm sending music out. And I can't imagine dealing with the publicity. But someone like, Pete Meekin or John Mackey or Michael Markowski, they're naturals at this. They feel comfortable in this world.
The only way I could self-publish, and I don't even know if it's done this way, is I have a website. I put the score and parts in PDF form, and I say, you can do the downloading and printing, and you pay me, and then we're done. But I don't think that's how they do it. I think they want to print their own stuff, and ship it out, and that way they know exactly who has it. I feel the way I would do it would be super easy because you basically do nothing because they do all the downloading and they do the printing, but you never know if they're going to give the parts away, and you never know what's going to happen. Anybody can do that, though.
Yeah, sure.
Have you heard of that, about just people downloading the PDFs?
Well, that's how I do it on my website, but I don't think anyone who really makes a living self-publishing, that's exclusively how they do it.
Mm.
You know, I've had a lot of guests, a lot of composers on the show who are self-published. Stephen Bryant had some interesting thoughts on this, of course, because he's very he likes to let people know sort of inside the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was willing to kind of share. When I talked to Michael Markowski, he has a printer in Arizona that he uses, and he lives in Brooklyn now.
Oh,
but he still sends his stuff out there to be printed, if I'm recalling this correctly. And so I just think, I don't know, I just think you have to kind of be built that way.
I agree. I kind of just want the publishers to do all the marketing, and it's been okay for me. I mean, I like I said, I had the orchestration career and the concert band career, and so far it's been working out for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about commissions.
Well, commissions are great. I get an average of 4 to 6 a year, which for me, that's a lot, because I like to give myself at least 2 months to compose and complete an entire composition. And that keeps me steady for a whole year. I'm not crazy busy, but if I took more, I would start to panic and get nervous because, like I said, it doesn't come easy for me. I really have to work at it. So yeah, I get a lot of my work through Facebook. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, you know, I find that to be true in the band world, that Facebook's very powerful.
Very powerful. I get, hey, are you available for a commission in 2020? I'm like, yeah, I am. And then the ball gets rolling. And once I have 6 per year, I have to turn down people or say, well, we have to jump into 2020 now, because I will not take more than that. So yeah, it's been great, and I hope it keeps going on and on.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that how platforms influence how people interact with each other. You know, I have a pinky still in the avant-garde new music world, and that's really active on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
But the band world's not active on Twitter. It's Facebook. And there's that band director's Facebook group with 25,000 people in it.
Wow.
It's crazy. Mm-hmm.
But do you ever write any 20th century stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I have a doctorate in composition, so I was writing a lot of modernist music. I didn't really feel like it was genuine to me, though. I mean, some of it was good, some of it wasn't. But I really, after I got my doctorate, I felt a little burnt out by it because I didn't feel like I was saying what I wanted to say necessarily, or I couldn't in that genre. And so I turned to the band after a few years of not writing at all. And I've been writing ever since. And so I still every now and then want to get back and I tinker with some pieces that I've been working on for years, kind of thing.
So I should be calling you Dr. Mark.
I do have a doctorate. That's what my kids at the school call me, Dr. Mark.
Dr. Mark, excellent. Congrats.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. All right. So do you have any general advice you'd give to young composers or like we talked about, maybe someone who might want to write some music?
Yeah, I have a lot of advice. First of all, if you want to be a composer and you feel you have that ability and that talent, I feel you should try for as long as you think you can. And if it gets to the point where you're not making any money, then you may need to reassess your goals. But it's important for when a composer is starting out, this is from me, not all composers. You have to be patient. Okay, unless you're a major genius, things take time. Even if you're really good, I feel things take a little time. For me, it was a very slow, gradual process, and I'm kind of glad it worked out that way because I had a lot to learn about composing. And I also think it's important for young students to write what they want to write. If someone's telling you, no, I don't want you to, if you have a teacher that is telling you, I don't want you to write this, I don't want you to write melodies, I want you to write this kind of stuff. And if you're not happy writing something that doesn't come from your heart, then that's not the person you should be studying with. Now, this is just my opinion. I think a teacher should help you get better at the kind of stylistic music that you want to write. mainly because I had that experience. So it's important to write what you love. And it's also very important to listen to a lot of music to find your own voice. That takes time because you want to sound like this guy or you want to sound like that guy. For a while, I wanted to sound like Williams, and now I really want to sound like me. But a lot of people say, "Oh, your music has a cinema John Williams-esque feel," and I'm like, "Well, thank you, but honestly, I don't know if that's true because that guy is, extremely good, and I'm good at what I do, but come on, this is John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith and Alan Smith. Come on." So it's really important for composers just to. Also, it's important for them to hear their music. If you're in college, talk to your director. I just ask them for a rundown, maybe 2 rundowns, because that is such a learning experience to hear it played back. You'd be surprised at the knowledge you will attain. And then also, like I said, be patient and keep writing and keep learning and find your own voice and listen to tons of music and then see what happens and submit your music to competitions. Even if you lose, try it again. I never liked competitions, but I've entered a few. I've lost every one. It doesn't mean you're not talented. It just means there were a specific kind of piece maybe they were looking for. And yeah, just have fun, enjoy creating music. As hard as it is, it's very rewarding when you come up with a composition you're proud of. And then one day you find you're published and then people are liking your music and then more publishing and commissions and guest conducting. It's a snowball effect. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I love that advice about being patient. It takes a long time.
It takes a long time, and the thing is, I'm patient. I was a very patient guy, and I waited tables for years, and I did delivery, food delivery for a while, and while I was working as a composer, but you have to supplement your income in the early stages.
I'm excited to announce the Everything Band podcast has joined forces with several other music education-related podcasts to form the Music Teacher Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. All right, Rossano, so thank you for the telling your story. Let's talk about the questions I ask all my guests. And the first of these is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Honestly, for me, I'm in competition with myself. I want to be the best that I can possibly be. If I start comparing myself to other composers, it's a downward spiral. So while I feel it's good to compete and be the best you can be, I feel I want to be the best that I can be, meaning each composition I want to be better, a little bit better than my last. I feel if you're like, when I hear the word competition, it has a negative, there's something negative to that. I mean, because we're all trying to make it in this world as musicians and composers and whatever we want to do in life. What I feel it's always good. Yes, we are in competition, but it's always good to support your competition. Because like I said, for me, I'm in competition with myself because there's certain people that I cannot compete with because they're just so darn talented. So I guess that would be my answer.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So Rossano, you have a lot you're doing between the band composing and the orchestrating. So how do you find a work-life balance in your work life?
I'm pretty good at balancing my work life because I won't take on more than I can handle. Like I said earlier, I will not take more than 6 commissions a year. And for orchestration, since each orchestration project lasts 1 to 2 weeks, I really can take as many as I can. And usually it's only about 4 films a year. So it's never like a film a week, because I would have to say, I have to turn that down because I have to work on my commission. So I'm really good at balancing that. I like to have a good time. I don't want to be a workaholic. I kind of like to keep office hours, like 8 hours composing or orchestrating, and then social time, which is very healthy for me, and going to the gym, staying healthy as possible. So I'm good at balancing my career and social life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what do you think the challenges are that are facing music or music education, and how can we best meet those challenges?
There are challenges. Well, of course, the arts. Some people don't support the arts, which is sad because it's so educational and makes humans creative, and that's our future. Yeah, let me think. One thing I have noticed, and I hope I don't offend anyone with what I'm about to say, we are so distracted by technology, by social media, by phones. I'm guilty as well. I actually have to force myself not to go onto Facebook because it's time consuming. It wastes time. With all these distractions, our youth is not getting ample time to practice their instruments, to maybe study more. And it is noticeable, not all around, but in specific areas. Some areas, musicians are struggling. Band programs are doing lower grade music, and they're in high school. And it just takes a little more practicing, less social media. And it worries me a little bit because I write harder music, and those pieces don't move as much as my easier level. Now, I don't write much easy music. I write about threes, and not many threes. Most of my music is grade 4 and a few 5s, never a 6. And the harder pieces, they don't sell because our students are not able to play these pieces as they were when in the 70s. These concert bands were hot. They could play grade 6. They sounded like college level groups. So I think we have to really think about finding time. If you have time to play around on Facebook for a half an hour, you have time to practice your instrument for half an hour a day. I mean, that's all I ask for high school students and middle school. Half hour a day would do wonders. An hour a day would be amazing. I'm not sure if I completely answered that question, but that's kind of how I feel education will improve. I mean, it's hard for kids to focus. Texting and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's really tough. I have to turn my phone off sometimes.
Oh, I know. I find myself distracted too. I'd probably write more music without my cell phone.
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, no, I don't either. I don't know if there is an answer. I'm sure someone's listening that has thoughts, but yeah, I mean, I think if we look at directors who are really, really doing great things with their bands, they're really pushing for excellence and competing in a way for the kids' attentions through excellence. But that takes a special teacher. Yeah,
it really does. Also, I know private teachers are expensive, and maybe with the economy, it's hard to afford private teachers. I know back in the 70s and 80s, everyone had a private teacher, and that really helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, it's expensive, and that could be an issue as well.
All right, Rossano. So what advice would you give your younger self, maybe the 18-year-old self at your high school graduation?
I would have found a way to find a teacher of composition who would have supported the style of music that I wanted to write. One thing. I would have, if I had known better, I was kind of, not sure of things back then, and I was a shy kid. I would have studied counterpoint. I would have studied form. I don't even know if I think my school had those courses, but I didn't know to study them. I was not aware. I just kind of did it on my own. So I would have told my younger self, before you find a college, make sure they have a class for counterpoint, form, harmony. Of course, they have theory, and teachers who will support the style of music that you're passionate about. I would have told my younger self to do that. And honestly, I feel that if I had more studying, I would be a much better composer.
That's interesting because you've brought that up a couple times, and I had an experience in one of my stops where I don't feel like I was, the type of music I wanted to write necessarily worked with the teacher that I had. And so it's hard to know that when you're young. And so maybe this is something that directors can think about when they have a student who might be interested in being a composer or even being a musician, the value of finding a teacher that they really sort of feel in sync with.
Exactly. And the thing is, if say you're hypothetically at college and you're studying, you decide you want to be a composition major, wouldn't the teacher say, okay, if you want to be a composition major, these are the other courses that you need to take for these 4 years? But that didn't happen to me. I didn't have the guidance that I really kind of needed for a shy kid who was, 19 years old, 20 years old when I started college,
Yeah. How was your trumpet experience?
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm.
I was a pretty good trumpet player, and it didn't take much effort. I was just naturally pretty good, but I did have to practice to get my endurance and my range. But I was always on first, and it was a lot of fun. And when I was practicing for my recital, my senior year, I was the best I've ever sounded. And my teacher, the late David Kewen, have you heard of him?
No.
He was a principal orchestrator with the Buffalo Philharmonic. He was my teacher last year. He said that I was good enough to be maybe a third trumpet player in a professional symphony. And I said, well, thank you so much. I don't want to be in a symphony, but it's good to know that I'm not that. I'm a pretty good player. So my experience with trumpet was, I love playing trumpet. I still play in a community group. I practice a little bit, and I'm not like I was when I was 20 years ago, but I love it. I'm so much fun.
So this is interesting because I also play my trumpet in a community group. What's that experience like? Because I know I'm kind of like the pet composer in the group.
It's when I was asked to join the group, I was hesitant just because it was just another thing that I had to do. So I was hesitant, but the conductor, Justin Raines, great guy, great musician, also a composer, said, just come to the rehearsal, see what. I went to the first rehearsal and I was in love. I had so much fun, and not all those people knew about me, but they programmed one of my pieces and I guess conducted, and they were all very supportive and very kind. They complimented me on my music, and they're going to program one of my pieces probably in spring. But we're all just friends, and it's all equal and fun, and it makes me very happy.
Yeah, I tell people, and I've said this on the show today, that the community band is my hobby because I still love music. But when you work in music all day, it's hard to think of it as a hobby. And so playing my trumpet actually becomes my hobby. Composing is my work. Teaching is my work.
I would have to say the same thing. It's like a fun hobby playing my trumpet.
Yeah, absolutely. And it keeps us in touch with what we do.
Yeah. And plus I love playing in groups because you learn a lot from sitting in a wind ensemble. You learn so much about balances and color combinations. It's just so fun.
All right, Rossano, so this is a difficult question. If you could plan it out, what would be the final work that you'd like to conduct or hear, and why?
I would have to say the final work for me, it is my favorite film score of all time. It has influenced me to pursue music and composition, would be John Williams' score for E.T. He won an Oscar for it, and the music is breathtakingly beautiful.
It sure is. And so you say that it inspired you to write, and I know we talked a little bit about that, but what is it about that score specifically?
His harmonic movement is, I don't know how he does it. It's brilliant. He can move from one key to another key, and all of a sudden, how did he do that? It's such grace and such beauty. And what's amazing about John Williams is he writes these themes that are very simple, but what he does around the themes is brilliant. He decorates the themes with counterpoint, with colors in the woodwinds, and what he does with strings is amazing. The colors he can create, with Harry Potter, but with E.T. his harmonic language brings me to tears.
Yeah, no, it's very beautiful. I love watching his career develop as you can see the influences sort of show up in his film scores and then how he sort of takes them and grows.
Yes.
I find that really fascinating about him.
Me too.
All right, Rossano, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Well, I have pieces coming out from publishers. Hafabra is releasing a new piece in January called Journey Through the Stratosphere, a piece I'm very proud of. It's very epic, very melodic and heroic. Very proud of this. Also, Alfred is releasing one of my compositions in probably May called Hypnotic Memories, which is a little different from my usual style. It's a little bit more minimalistic. And there's other things coming out, but I think I'm not allowed to reveal that yet until the release. But some fun music coming out through publishers.
Sure. And so how about a work of your own? If you had to recommend one piece for someone to listen to know you, what piece would that be?
There's one of my more popular pieces. It's called Resplendent Glory. It's a grade 5 concert band piece, and that has done very well. It's very popular. I've received many messages about that concert.
Rossano, how can people get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me is Facebook and just message me. I don't have a website, and I'm going to keep it that way for a while.
Okay, excellent. Rossano, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mark. I had a great time.
Yeah, it was a good conversation.